Have you ever noticed how someone can text you every day, laugh with you for hours, open up about their childhood, say things like, "I've never felt this comfortable with anyone," and yet somehow freeze the moment the word commitment enters the room? It's confusing, it's frustrating, and if you're honest, it quietly messes with your sense of self-worth. Because when someone clearly likes you but won't choose you, your brain doesn't ask what's wrong with them. It asks what's wrong with me. And here's the terrifying part. The longer you stay in that uncertainty, the more emotionally invested you become. Not because the relationship is progressing, but because your nervous system is hooked on the possibility of what could be. That waiting space, that's where anxiety lives. That's where people start overgiving, overthinking, and slowly shrinking themselves just to keep someone around. Romantic, right? Now, most people assume the reason someone won't commit is simple. They say things like, they're afraid of commitment, or they just haven't met the right person yet, which sounds comforting until you realize how often those same people magically do commit, just not to you. Ouch. That realization alone can keep someone stuck for years, replaying conversations in their head like a Netflix series that refuses to end. So let's interrupt the pattern for a second. Quick question. If someone enjoys all the benefits of closeness, intimacy, emotional support, and consistency, without any responsibility, why would they rush to change that? I know, not the most romantic thought, but it's an important one. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most dating advice avoids, liking you is not the same as choosing you. Attraction doesn't automatically create action, and chemistry, no matter how intense, doesn't guarantee emotional readiness. In fact, sometimes the more someone likes you, the more threatened they feel by what commitment would require of them. That's the paradox. You see, commitment isn't about feelings, it's about identity. It forces someone to confront questions like, am I ready to be consistent? Am I ready to be accountable? Am I ready to show up even when it's uncomfortable? And for someone who has built their sense of freedom around emotional flexibility, commitment feels less like love and more like exposure. This is where people get trapped, because the person who won't commit often sends just enough warmth to keep hope alive. A sweet message here, a deep conversation there, just enough to make you think if I'm patient, if I don't pressure them, they'll eventually choose me. That belief is powerful and dangerous, because what's actually happening underneath the surface is something very few people ever explain, and once you see it, you'll never unsee it. There's a moment in situations like this that almost everyone misses. It's quiet. It doesn't feel dramatic. But it's the moment when your behavior starts adjusting itself around their uncertainty. You respond a little faster. You ask for less. You accept vague answers where clarity used to matter, not because you suddenly stopped valuing commitment, but because you're trying to protect the connection. And that's where the dynamic subtly shifts. The issue isn't that you want too much. It's that you're slowly training yourself to want less reassurance, less definition, less emotional safety. And every time you do that, you send a message without realizing it. I'm willing to stay even if my needs aren't met. That message doesn't inspire commitment. It removes the urgency for it. This is where fear sneaks in, not loud fear, but quiet fear. The fear of rocking the boat. The fear of asking the question that might change everything. The fear that if you name what you want, you'll lose them. And ironically, the very thing you're afraid to lose is already being withheld from you. Here's something important to understand. People commit when the cost of losing you feels greater than the comfort of staying undefined. When you make yourself endlessly adaptable, endlessly patient, endlessly understanding, you reduce that cost. You become safe to delay, comfortable to postpone, easy to keep without fully choosing. And before your mind jumps to self-blame, pause. This isn't about doing something wrong. It's about responding normally to emotional uncertainty. The human brain seeks security. When it doesn't get it, it tries to earn it. So you give more, hoping they'll feel safer. But the opposite often happens. They feel less pressure to step up because the relationship continues without them having to. There's also a story many people tell themselves here. If I don't push, I'll seem low pressure. If I don't ask, I won't scare them away. But attraction doesn't grow in emotional fog. Clarity doesn't kill connection. It reveals whether the connection is real. And when someone avoids clarity, it's rarely because they don't care. It's because clarity would force a decision. Let's reset the tone for a second. Imagine someone saying, I really like you. I just don't want to define anything yet. Now imagine that sentence, translated honestly. What it often means is, I like how this feels, but I'm not ready to organize my life around it. That's not cruelty. It's self-protection. The danger comes when you mistake emotional availability for commitment. Late night talks, deep confessions, vulnerability. These things feel intimate, and they are, but intimacy without direction creates emotional attachment without security. And that combination is exhausting because the truth is, if someone is truly afraid of losing you, they don't keep you in limbo. They move closer. And when they don't, the question isn't how to wait better. It's how long you're willing to stay in a space that keeps asking you to be smaller. And once you see that, something shifts internally, because the power in this situation was never in convincing them. It was always in what you choose to tolerate and what you decide you're finally done negotiating away. The moment you stop negotiating your needs, something uncomfortable happens. The dynamic becomes visible, not through words, but through behavior. Some people lean in, others pull away, and while that can be painful to witness, it's also deeply clarifying, because uncertainty thrives in silence, but truth emerges when there's nothing left to manage. This is where excitement and fear collide. Excitement because you're finally standing in self-respect. Fear because you're no longer controlling the outcome. You're no longer performing emotional gymnastics to keep the connection alive. You're letting reality respond to you instead of chasing it. And for someone who benefits from ambiguity, that shift can feel threatening. What's fascinating is how often commitment avoidance is mistaken for emotional depth. Someone can sound self-aware, reflective, even wounded, and still be unavailable. Insight doesn't equal readiness. Understanding their patterns doesn't mean they're willing to change them. And empathy without boundaries quietly turns into emotional labor. You might recognize this pattern. They open up when you pull back. They become warm when they sense distance. They reconnect just as you're about to detach. That isn't coincidence, it's regulation. They're responding to the possibility of loss, not to the desire for partnership. And once closeness is restored, the urgency fades again. This cycle is addictive because it creates emotional highs and lows. Relief feels like connection. Anxiety feels like longing. And your nervous system starts confusing intensity with intimacy. But consistency, real consistency, doesn't create emotional whiplash. It creates calm. And calm, when you're used to chaos, can feel strangely unfamiliar. Here's a quiet truth that changes everything. People don't commit when they feel pressured, but they also don't commit when nothing is required of them. Commitment emerges when emotional access comes with expectation, when closeness isn't free-floating, but grounded in mutual responsibility. This doesn't mean ultimatums. It means alignment. It means your words, energy, and standards point in the same direction. You stop offering partner-level investment to someone who hasn't chosen a partner-level role. And the moment you stop doing that, the relationship either evolves or reveals its limit. And yes, that revelation can hurt, especially if you've been holding on to potential. Especially if you've been telling yourself, if they just healed a little more, or if life were less stressful, or if I stayed patient. But potential is not a promise. And waiting for someone to become ready is different from being chosen by someone who already is. The real urgency isn't about forcing commitment. It's about recognizing when you're emotionally investing in someone who is comfortable staying halfway. Because every moment you stay in that space reinforces a pattern, not just with them, but within yourself. And once that pattern breaks, something powerful happens. You stop asking why they won't choose you and start asking why you've been choosing uncertainty. That question changes the entire story and leads directly to the final realization most people never reach. When you start asking yourself why uncertainty became familiar, you begin uncovering something much older than this one connection. Often it traces back to a belief formed long before this person ever entered your life, the idea that love must be earned, maintained, or proven through patience, that closeness comes after endurance, that if you stay long enough, someone will eventually see your value. This belief doesn't come from weakness. It comes from adaptation, from learning at some point that consistency wasn't guaranteed. So your nervous system learned to tolerate emotional gaps, learn to wait, learn to read signals instead of receiving clarity. And when someone today feels warm one moment and distant the next, it doesn't feel foreign. It feels familiar That's why these dynamics are so magnetic. They don't just attract you, they activate you. The unpredictability keeps your attention engaged. The uncertainty keeps hope alive. And hope, when paired with emotional investment, can become a powerful trap. There's also a quieter fear operating underneath all of this. The fear that if you ask for more, you'll be exposed as too much, too emotional, too intense, too needy. But notice the contradiction. Wanting consistency, definition, and emotional safety isn't excessive. It's foundational. The discomfort isn't coming from your needs. It's coming from offering them to someone who isn't equipped to meet them. Here's something rarely said out loud. When someone avoids commitment, they're not just protecting their freedom, they're protecting their self-image. Commitment requires follow-through. It reveals whether someone can sustain the version of themselves they present at the beginning. And for someone who doubts their capacity to be consistent, delaying commitment feels safer than risking failure. So they stay in the space where effort is optional, where intention can be expressed without obligation, where affection doesn't require reliability. And as long as you participate in that space, the structure never changes. This is where your power quietly returns, not by demanding more, not by convincing, but by becoming emotionally unavailable to half-formed connections. You stop chasing reassurance and start honoring alignment. You stop filling in the gaps and let the gaps speak for themselves. It can feel lonely at first. Pulling your energy back always does, because you're no longer distracted by emotional noise. You're left with clarity. And clarity has a way of confronting you with truths you can't unsee. But something else happens too. You begin to feel grounded, less reactive, less anxious. You start noticing how much energy you were spending managing uncertainty. And once that energy comes back to you, your standards don't feel heavy anymore. They feel natural. And that leads to the most important realization of all. The reason someone won't commit is rarely about your worth. It's about compatibility at the level of readiness. And once you stop trying to bridge that gap alone, you create space for a very different kind of connection, one that doesn't make you wait to be chosen. The moment you truly understand this, the chase dissolves. Not because you stop caring, but because you stop confusing desire with direction. You realize that someone liking you, enjoying you, even feeling deeply connected to you is not the same as being prepared to build something with you. And once that distinction settles in your body, not just your mind, everything changes. You stop asking questions that keep you stuck, like how do I make them choose me? Or what am I doing wrong? And instead, a different question emerges. Does this situation actually support the kind of love I want to experience? That question is calm, grounded, and incredibly revealing. Here's the shift most people never reach. Commitment isn't something you earn by proving your value. It's something that naturally forms when two people are aligned in readiness, intention, and emotional capacity. When those elements are present, commitment doesn't feel forced. It feels inevitable. And when they're missing, no amount of patience can manufacture them. This is where excitement returns, but in a healthier form. The excitement of knowing you no longer have to audition for love. The relief of realizing that uncertainty was never your fault. But staying in it was a choice you're now aware of. And awareness is the beginning of freedom. You may notice something surprising after this realization. The people who are vague, inconsistent, or emotionally unavailable start to lose their grip on you. Their mixed signals no longer spark anxiety, they create distance. And in that space, something far more attractive takes root: self-trust. Self-trust is magnetic. It changes how you speak, how you wait, how you walk away. And it does something else quietly but powerfully. It filters. People who aren't ready drift out faster. People who are aligned lean in sooner. Not because you demanded anything, but because your energy stopped accommodating confusion. And yes, there may be moments where you miss the intensity, the anticipation, the emotional highs and lows. But what replaces it is steadiness, safety, the kind of connection that doesn't make you question your worth or wait for reassurance, the kind that feels mutual instead of uncertain. So if someone likes you but won't commit, let that information guide you, not wound you. Let it show you where they are without turning it into a verdict about who you are. Because the right connection doesn't require you to minimize yourself, manage ambiguity, or wait indefinitely to be chosen. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. And the moment you stop settling for half-formed love, You make room for the kind that meets you fully, without hesitation, without fear, and without conditions.